Well, I can honestly tell you what I truly don't like about Boston. And part of it is their sports fans and their sports culture. Not that they have a bad sports team or bad players or anything like that. As a matter of fact, ooh, sorry about that. As a matter of fact, they actually have some of the greatest players in the world and a great rich history behind them. For one, let's take a look at the New England Patriots. There's no secret about their standings with the NFL and what they did with Tom Brady. The Boston Celtics, you can date back from the days of Bill Russell going into the days of Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and then Robert Parrish. Then you have the likes of the modern inception of that, Paul Pierce, and then Kevin Garnett, so on and so forth. So they are a great dynasty when it comes to sports. And then the Bruins, the Red Sox, who've had a few MLB World Series titles under their belt. They're a great sports city and a town for what it's worth. But the one thing you got to understand about Boston is for that same type of tenacity and that same type of zeal that their people have. Also, what comes with that is an ugly side of racism, an ugly side of vulgar, degenerate behavior in terms of how they constantly attribute their positive traits as something to the extent of like, well, okay, it's because we're from Boston. And because of this is Boston strong. And because of that, it's Boston this and Boston that. Well, I'm just too Boston for you. Boston, Boston. Everything is about, okay, because I'm from Boston, this is the reason why I react to things and therefore such and such. I think it's just one of those old wives' tales that they try to do. On top of that, these myths that they try to create in a term of propaganda with how they're trying to hype up their city. Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of pride that comes with that. But make no mistake, Boston is one of those towns where if, let's say, for whatever reason, their sports team goes and doesn't do well, they're going to start a riot. That's just what they're going to do. And then they're going to taunt the other team, and then they're going to get into fights with other fan supporters of other teams. That's just what they do. So, are they really any different than, let's say, the soccer hooligans of Europe and England, where these people fight for their teams and they cuss each other out? They even get into some racial slurs and whatnot. Yeah, it's really no different than that, right? Now, look, in all honesty, full disclosure, I've never really understood or really have felt the wrath of the ugly sports fans of Boston. Okay. And what do I mean by that? Well, growing up in New Jersey, obviously, you guys know I live in California now, but growing up in New Jersey, there was always this rivalry with New York teams, whether it would be with the New York Yankees or the Mets or the New York Rangers versus the Bruins. And then you have the Boston Red Sox, obviously, taking on the New York Yankees. And then just the overall uh, history behind that, dating back to Babe Ruth, when Babe Ruth was originally a player that was bought by the Boston Red Sox and then got recruited and transferred into the Yankees sometime in his career. And obviously, everybody always remembers Babe Ruth as a New York Yankees player, even though he started with the Boston's Red Sox. Just like Shaquille O'Neal. If you're a long enough basketball fan, you know that Shaquille O'Neal was with the Orlando Magics in the beginning of his career. And then later on, he transitioned to the Lakers. And then this is where you prominently know him to be as Shaq, the Laker player, the number 34 guy instead of the number 32 guy in the Orlando Magics or the number 36 guy in the Boston Celtics. That's just what you have going on with how people are going to constantly view you. Just like Babe Ruth, they're always going to view Babe Ruth as a New York Yankee player, even though some Boston residents and their baseball fans are going to say something completely different or something completely contrasting to that that would favor their side and would just make their city look good for what it's worth. But nonetheless, that's Boston in a nutshell in terms of their sports culture and their history and everything in between. Now, I promised you guys that I was going to go through the entire card. I obviously gave you some predictions of how I'm going to see the main card with the main event and the co-main event. And perhaps I'm going to change some of my picks as we go through the cards again. Maybe I'm not, but I did go through the main cards. I do want to give respect to the card on the prelims and the other undercard fights because the UFC is not like boxing. You see, if you notice, you look at most boxing channels, including some of the boxing that I cover. What exactly do I do when I go out and I cover boxing? I do like maybe one match, which is the headline and the main event itself. I don't usually go into the co-main unless it was last week's fight with Derek Chisora and Gerald Washington co-headlining Anthony Joshua and Robert Helenius. Now, that is a rare exception to one of the few out there in boxing, but with MMA and especially with the UFC, you're going to constantly get an action-packed night. And usually some of that comes with the prelims. For example, if the prelims are no good, then you know for sure that the main event is going to be stellar or the entire card in and of itself. However, the way that the UFC structures their 11, 12 fight card, it's designed so that at least one disappointment can make up for the fight of the night or the most exciting situation that had happened in the cage. Compelling stories that come with that, controversies, like, for example, guys taking nut shots. Now they can't continue. Oh, that becomes a big story in and of itself by the end of the night. And then in that following Monday of that particular pay per view or fight night. But nonetheless, that is what you get out of a UFC fight night. It's just constant action and constant drama, just like earlier's a press conference with Ian Garry and Neil Magny stealing the show. Now, I got to tell you, I got a lot to say about that beyond the cage. And you know what? This is one of the things that I love to emphasize on my channel is that I can also talk about the kicks and punches, the takedowns, the technicalities that go into martial arts, mixed martial arts, boxing, and all of prize fighting and all of the sports that are surrounded in that particular compository sports that we're mentioning. Nonetheless, one of the things that I can also do with reporting or covering a match or covering an event or covering a fight is also breaking down the storylines that come with that, the drama, the political side of it, the financial side of it, the business side of it, every spectrum I want to touch on. So with this particular story with Ian Garry and Neil Magny, long story short, Neil Magny came in as a late replacement of some sort. I believe Jeff Neal was supposed to be the original opponent for Ian Garry, and in comes Neil Magny because, like what I said in the preview to this card, and I believe it's in the part 2 of the 2-part series that I had in this channel. Let's see, I had the UFC in Serious Trouble series, part 1 and part 2. I broke down the UFC 292 main card, and that is on the description below of this video if you guys want to check it out. But of course, check it out after you're checking out this live. But nonetheless, I talk about how Neil Magny came into this fight on a short notice, and not surprising because of the fact that he is just a modern Donald Cerrone. There's nothing else to it when it comes to Neil Magny. He takes the fights, he takes the challenges, and here he is taking on this short notice against an up-and-coming prospect in Ian Garry. Okay, so the problem here is that Neil Magny said something to the effect of, well, I'm going to beat you like my child, or I'm going to be your daddy, or this and that. And the controversy behind that is Ian Garry's reaction. His reaction is saying something to the effect that you should not be out there beating kids, or you beat your kids, or this and that. And then what followed after that was a controversy. Within hours after the press conference, you see people making videos on YouTube responding to this, having a political angle to which some people are pro beating their kids for discipline, or getting them in order, or getting them to fall in line when they misbehave. And a couple of content creators I could say in mind that I've listened to, that I've shared this sentiment, is none other than Jesse on Fire and MMA Guru. Now, they're going to give you the most extreme end of the opinion on this matter. And why is that? Because, look, you got to understand, they're entertainers. Now, am I an entertainer too? Yeah, but I'm a different kind of entertainer, or a different kind of podcaster or YouTuber, in a way where I'm going to tell you the truth, because what entertains me is the truth and the objective reality. You see, other content creators, and this is no disrespect to them in any particular way, what other content creators like to do in the MMA, boxing, and combat sports space is they like to sensationalize their feelings, or sensationalize their opinions into outrageous takes. And here's the thing. How's it going, Kyrie? Oh, thank you, Gino Alpha. What's up, my man? Yeah, just chilling. We're just talking about the cards, but at the same time, also breaking down the story with Ian Garry and Neil Magny. By the way, tell me what you think about what happened with Ian Garry and Neil Magny, the little child abuse situation that they were getting on about. And here's my opinion on this, right? A lot of people have extreme opinions, one end to the other of this. Here's one thing you have to understand. I don't think it's highly conducive to go out and beat a kid, because you will somehow affect them psychologically in the most negative way. And then you're also sort of taking a chance, because there is the argument that says, well, you're going to make children stronger this way. They're going to be a lot tougher now because of this, and they're going to remember this, or they're going to fall in line, or this and that. I'm not saying that this is true or this is not true, because everyone's anecdotal experience is going to vary. And that's one thing that you have to understand with this particular opinion. Now, you also have to take this with a grain of salt, because you got to understand that Ian Garry is hyping himself up to go to war with this man in less than 48 hours, just so he can somehow drum up this evil versus good narrative. And you know what? Sometimes that's not the worst thing, especially when you have militaries and warriors and conquerors all throughout history that have used this method to motivate and to rally up their troops and to get them motivated to know who the enemy is, so that when they go out there in a battlefield, they're not going to have any reservations about what they're going to do to the other guy. So that's basically what Ian Garry is doing here. Now, whether he truly believes it or not is highly debatable. My opinion, I don't think he really believes it, at least not anywhere outside of the realm of the fight world. Or Ian Garry really is in what you would consider a progressive ideologue, that he really is driven by this. What did Gene say here? Obviously, Neil Magny just meant he was going to whoop Ian Garry like Ian Garry is his son. I don't think Neil was just openly admitting to abusing his child. He made a poor analogy and Garry ran with it. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the precise truth about that particular matter. Because, yeah, Ian Garry needed to run with it for those reasons that I just mentioned about conquerors, generals, and militaries and empires in the past, in the propaganda that they had to do to wild up their troops to fight the enemy. So this is just all that he's doing. Now, with Neil Magny, you're absolutely correct. All he is just spitting some metaphors, right? Spitting some similes, some contrasting like situations, and more importantly, a hypothetical blanket statement that you got to understand in what Neil Magny is saying. But at the same time, you also got to understand Ian Gary has his own agenda. And what exactly is that agenda? Well, for now, he's sort of breaking into the top 10, so he has to make some noise in a different way. And now he's in a press conference. So now I'm not saying that he's doing anything that Connor is doing, but by the way, that's one of the things that a lot of people are saying online, right? They're saying that like, oh yeah, Ian Gary is trying to emulate Conor McGregor. How, in what way? Because they sound the same, because they have the same accent. Well, they also live in the same city. So that's like saying, well, Matt Serra is trying to be Chris Weidman, or Chris Weidman is trying to be Aljo, because they all sound alike. Well, they're all from Long Island, New York. They're all going to sound the same, just like how they're going to sound different from people in the Bronx or people in the Queens. And then Gene writes here, and good for Ian Gary. He did everything he said he was going to do. He made himself into a star of the press conference. Ian is one that's going to be the headlines. He's kind of he kind of bitched Magny. Yeah, that's a good point. Not necessarily that he bitched him, but what he did was try to set the tone of control. And I want you to notice this, because now I'm going to get into well, I'm not just going to get into the kicks and punches. I'm going to get into everything with this. But there is an element of kicks and punches and strategy that comes into this. And let me explain. What Ian Gary is trying to do is he's trying to set precedents, meaning that what Ian Gary did was say, like, you know what? I'm not going to let you talk. I'm going to control the situation, just like what he's going to do when he's going to try to control the center of the octagon. You see, that's what Ian Gary is currently doing right now. He's setting the tone. He's setting the pace into what he wants to do in the fight. Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay, so Gene writes here. What did he write here? Okay, so you might be right. Ian Gary is definitely a progressive kind of guy. He married a single mom, took her last name. Kind of makes me think he could have delusionally convinced himself he's a SJW king. Okay, so here's the thing, right? I think Ian Gary comes from a posh side of Dublin. Okay. And for the American audience that's watching this, if you don't understand what posh means, in the English Irish side of the world, posh means a snob, somebody who's of an upper middle class um, type of person, right? Somebody who lives a little bit better than, let's say, people of the working class. In other words, that's literally the life of Ian Gary in comparison to Conor McGregor, who says that, yeah, he was a son of a plumber, he was son of a taxi driver, he was living under the dole, and this and that. Shout outs to Zane Musa Boxing in the house right now, dropping in with some comments. What up, Zane? By the way, guys, don't forget to check out his channel, like and subscribe, just like you like and subscribe on mine, for all your boxing dosage needs and for all your predictions and whatnot. My man is out there predicting all the boxing matches and all the niche boxing matches out there. So come check that out. But yeah, back to Ian Gary and Neil Magny. Here's the thing, right? Neil Magny, as you guys know, was a former military, right? And here's something that I know about a lot of military guys, right? And this is like one of the most unspoken things that a lot of military guys don't like to talk about. But a lot of military guys do sort of abuse their kids, right? I mean, I've said the word already before, but I don't want to say it because obviously you know that you get flagged for these types of things. But yeah, they go out and do horrible things to their kids, man. That's just what it is. It's a very tough job. I'm not excusing them in any way, but like sometimes, things get hard, and then on top of that, there's PTSD that comes into the fold. So, you got to think, man, it's not far fetched to say that Neil Magny may discipline his kids in a way that may not be, how do I say this, desirable in the eyes of the progressive people out there that see kids as an equal of some sort, or see kids as somebody that they should talk to on like a knee eye to eye level or something to that extent. And the thing is that, look, here's what I wanted to say about this particular story with Ian Garry and Neil Magny, beyond just the kicks and punches, is that I don't think there's a right way to parent. And there are limits to what you can do in terms of punishment. There are limits to what you can do in terms of spoiling them or giving them a happy life. But then in reality, if you're a true parent yourself, you're never really going to know. You're just going to try to wing it in some kind of way. You're trying to wing what is the best scenario of what you're going to do for your kids. Are you going to homeschool them, or are you going to send them to a public school or a private school? But then one thought comes to mind. Well, if you homeschool them, then maybe they're not going to be so social in some kind of way. Maybe they're not going to have that outgoing personality. Maybe they're going to become a bit bitter or just unskilled in the way that they're going to communicate with people. And then if you want to bring them to public school, then the other worry is that, well, maybe because if I bring them to a public school, they may be exposed to this and they may be exposed to that and they may be exposed to drugs. But then you think about private school, you think that private schools are any better. I mean, you ask anybody that's been to a Catholic school, a private preppy school, or something to that sort, a lot of them will tell you that these guys can come up on cocaine and all these, types of drugs that they could do. And by the way, they're even worse than, let's say, the kids in the inner cities and the poor neighborhoods, because guess what? They actually have the money to buy it in large quantities. And then sometimes they even go out and get into distributions themselves, trying to play a little trafficking game and whatnot. But what I'm trying to say, not to get off the tangent with that, is that there are no right way or wrong way to raise your kids. Now, obviously, Ian Garry is using this as some sort of way to promote the fight, saying, oh, well, you abuse your kids or this and that. But in reality, all Neil Magny was just really trying to say was that, like, hey, I'm going to beat you like you're my son, this and that. He's basically saying it in a way where he's using it as a metaphor, right? There's no other way to really to put that. Let's see. What do you think Garry is such a huge betting favorite? Oh, why do you think Garry is such a huge betting favorite? Well, here's the reason why. He's a younger man. He's obviously a lot fresher. Neil Magny has been under just grinding for years and years under the UFC banner, right? You've noticed that he's fought maybe 5 times in 1 year in a UFC calendar. That's a lot. And you got to think he's the new Donald Cerrone. And what happened with Donald Cerrone? He eventually started falling apart. You've seen what happened in a Conor McGregor fight. Didn't really give Conor much of a fight in that end. And a lot of that just comes with just the grind of the sport, right? The thing is that eventually the grind of this sport is going to wear you down. You've seen it with Usman, and I hate to say that. That's one of my favorite guys out there, Usman. I've interacted with him prior to him being a champion, and a few of my guys that train in Colorado train with him. So, and then on top of that, he's managed by Ali. So, it was sad to see that fight unfold with Leon Edwards the way that it did. Twice, by the way, and because obviously the second time around, I thought that he had won that, but that's neither here or there. But the first time around, when he got head kicked like that, I thought it was a result of the high altitude, obviously, because it was in Salt Lake City, the last year's Salt Lake City card, not this one with the BMF on the same day as Crawford and Spence. But during that time, I thought that, yes, this was going to be a factor in some kind of way. But I thought it wouldn't be such a huge factor because guess what? He's the guy that trains in elevation, not Leon Edwards, which is the reason why Leon Edwards had this type of problems that he did in their first matchup before they were even champions, where there was two up and coming prospects fighting back in 2015. I saw the same thing that was going on, right? And in terms of Leon Edwards not being able to stop the takedowns, even though he was successful in his takedown attempts and was even able to mount Usman in a second fight. But nonetheless, Usman was wearing down because of the years of wrestling. Look, the guy can't even run because of how messed up his knees are, right? So on top of that, this kind of affects you in some kind of way to where you're going to get caught at some point. So if you're asking why Ian Garry is such a huge betting favorite, I think that has a lot to do with it. And then on top of that, I think that there's a lot of people out there that don't really believe in Ian Garry. Now, I don't know how the betting system works, but here's what it is. I think that there's something to the effect of, let's say, if you make a guy a favorite and then he ends up winning, I think you make more money or less money or somewhere in a way where they kind of sway the lines in that kind of way. But I'm not a gambling man, and I talk more about the business side of fighting, the technical side of fighting, the story and the drama side of fighting, but not so much on the gambling side. But I think that's the best way I could explain that. And then he writes here, this is unrelated, but do you plan on analyzing the psychological ass whooping Dylan Dennis gave Jake Paul? You mean Logan Paul, right? Now, yes, I got to tell you, man, that right there was an absolute 10-7 beating verbally online. Because here's something that you got to understand about Dylan Dennis and Logan Paul. Okay, but Logan Paul more in the focus of him per se. The guy has no moral compass. I don't think he does. And this is just my honest opinion. Obviously, there's going to be some people in his camp that are going to say something different, but then there's people that are within his camp that don't say anything different, just like that Middle Eastern Christian guy that was in his group. I think his name was George or something like that. You ask him about why he left the Logan Paul show, Impulsive. He'll tell you things in a way that he's kind of skirting around it. Like, he doesn't want to say that Logan Paul is a sociopathic individual who doesn't care about others, that only cares about himself, that doesn't care about how others feel, and will say what he wants to say. But he's not going to give you in full details about that, right? But at the same time, you also got to think that Logan does everything for the media. So when you got a guy like that and he meets the type of girl that he has, it's open season. It's open season because Logan never had this thought in his mind. Maybe this girl isn't any good. Maybe she's not the right one. Maybe she might somewhere down the line embarrass me because of all these different people that she's been around with in the industry. Now, here's a tricky thing about Logan Paul, right? Logan, what did you say here? Logan Paul cries when seeing colors for the first time, but laughed his ass off seeing a dead body. Yeah. Yeah, that's I think you're referring to the Japanese vlog video that he made back in 2017 that got him banned. And by the way, what's interesting about that is actually the reason why he got into combat sports in the first place. I honestly think that if that cancellation did not happen with Logan Paul in 2017, I don't think he would have gotten into the realm of combat sports at all. He had to get into combat sports because him and his brother were guys that were athletes and combat athletes growing up. Obviously, they were wrestlers, so they got called out to do this celebrity boxing match. So they obliged and followed up. What did you say here? His fiance had been with all the stars, LeBron, DiCaprio, a few billionaires too. Leftover Logan was made a fool of. Yeah, he definitely was. And look, here's the thing. You got to understand, George St. Pierre, Khabib, and Brock Lesnar What do they all have in common? Obviously, Khabib being the Muslim guy, you could understand why he would take this stance. And what stance is that exactly? These guys don't go out there and post their family or their wives, their girlfriends, or significant others or children to the world, because guess what? All those things that I just mentioned are all open season. 100%, they are all open season. And that's the reason why George St. Pierre said, yeah, I never show anybody that I am dating, because if people see who I am dating, they're going to use that against me. And they're going to say, George, you are intoxicated. Okay, but whatever. That's the reason why. With Brock Lesnar, here's the interesting thing about Brock Lesnar. He takes this stance as well. You guys know who Brock Lesnar's wife is? Sable. You guys know anything about WWE and Sable back in the days? She used to, how do I say this in a family friendly way? Let's just say that if you saw what Sable did for a living, you would not think that this somebody was wifey material in any kind of way, right? But Brock Lesnar did. So, I guess in a way, look, you can't do anything about her past. People are going to have pictures of her out there. But in the current moment of time, guess what Brock Lesnar does? He doesn't share his life with Sable to the rest of the world. He didn't go out there like Hulk Hogan and did Hogan Knows Best, which ultimately ruined the relationship and the family of Hulk Hogan. And you've seen how that turned out. And if you don't know, then Google what happened to Hulk Hogan post reality show in 2006, so on and so forth. Sable showed, what did you say here? Sable showed the whole crowd her wrestling abilities, her wrestling ability. That's clever. I see what you did there. Okay. Yeah. That's what it is, right? But unlike Logan Paul, right? Do you see anybody out there talking about Sable in any kind of way? Obviously, I'm bringing it up because I'm a WWE fan. I know Brock Lesnar from the WWE days, and I know that much about his personal life because most hardcore WWE people, or just even some MMA people, know that he's with Sable. And other than that, I would have never brought her up. Nobody brings her up, is the point that I'm trying to make. But with Logan Paul, he has a fiance, and here's the crazy thing about this, right? I would have thought that he's a lot smarter than this, because obviously Logan likes to say that, he's a very smart guy. Just like anybody who's been successful out there, they're going to tell you that, well, it was my intelligence that got me here. It was this, it was that. But then on the other hand, during the George Floyd era, when that thing happened, he went on and did a special podcast where he admitted to the world that he has white privilege. He's like, well, the only reason why I'm able to go out there and do all these pranks and this and that is because I am a white kid. I have white privilege, or this and that. He actually admitted that. Look it up on the Impulsive episode regarding the George Floyd situation. But that's Logan Paul for you in a nutshell. He doesn't have a moral compass. He doesn't stand on really anything. He doesn't have a strong stance on any particular subject, not politically, not religiously. In fact, he mocks religion. He mocks people that try to have a relationship with God in some kind of way, like his Christian friend George that he kicked out of the Impulsive podcast. This is the way that Logan is. So, in turn, even as smart as he is, and I'm going to tell you guys from an Islamic perspective, as smart as you are, your immorality can dumb you down. And that's something that you have to understand. I know a lot of people don't like to look at the correlation between the two, but you got to think, what is a sin? Okay. And I don't want to make this into something that's not, but hey, look, we're just freestyling, we're flowing right in this live, so we're gonna go with it, right? What exactly is a sin? Okay, a sin is committing a transgression against yourself or others. So, what are some sins that you can commit upon yourself? Some transgressions that you can commit upon yourself. Well, a lot of it can consist of things that deals with lack of self-control. Okay. So is lacking self control of any kind a sin? Yes. Talking about people in a bad way, not restraining yourself from doing that, is that a sin? Yes. Backbiting people? Yes. Getting angry, is that a sin? Yes. How about um how about what is this? Fornication is, I'm trying to be careful about what I'm saying here, but what about that? Is that a sin? Yes. Okay. What do all of these things have in common? A lack of self control. So if you lack self control, guess what? You're going to dumb yourself down a little bit, with a few percentages down, no matter how intelligent you are. Logan is such a degenerate, anti godlike man. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he got with a girl that's been around on purposely. He could have gotten any woman he wanted, and that's who he chose to wed. Yeah, that's an interesting point, because let me push back on what you said here. Okay. And with all due respect, but I think it's still an important point that you brought up. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he got with a girl that's been around. He could have gotten any woman he wanted. Now that part I want to emphasize right there. He could have gotten any woman he wanted, but he chose to wed this particular person. Okay, let's emphasize on that. Could Logan really get any woman that he wanted? Because you assume that he can. And I'm not saying that he can't, because obviously under Western standards of what it means to be a high value male in the Andrew Tate terminology of things, you could say that Logan Paul fits all that description, right? I mean, the guy is a multimillionaire. He's tall. He's in great shape. He's on TV. He's got notoriety. Okay. He's got all these things. But once again, you got to understand something, right? Suppose Logan wanted to get with somebody who was, let's say, a conservative Christian or a conservative Muslim or a conservative practicing person of Judaism. Could he get with people like that? I don't think he can. Because if you were, let's say, a woman that was in that particular spectrum of things, you're a person that's God fearing, a person that cares about what their family thinks about them, what their lineage thinks about them, what their ancestors think about them, what their community thinks about them. You're not going to choose somebody who is a degenerate, no matter how much money or notoriety they have. And this is something that I think a lot of people in the materialized Western world really need to understand, is that what you see as a pot of gold, other people will see as a pot of you know what. And that's something that's really important that a lot of people have to understand in the Western mindset. Because if you're godless and you don't have a religion, you don't have a purpose, you don't stand for anything other than just the daily pleasures of your life, guess what? You're going to fall for anything. You're going to take any positions on anything so long as it benefits you monetarily, so long that it benefits your status, so long that it benefits your job, or all these things that is somehow going to help you in yeah, good point. Honestly, I never thought of that. Yeah. So what, going back to Logan's girl, you got to think that Logan is really a lot more limited than you think. A lot of these guys are really limited more than you think. And let me explain why. Because you got to think about this. Isn't it historically that most celebrities only date other celebrities? So who is this girl that Logan is in love with? I don't know too much about her. I don't know if she's an actress or if she's a rapper or if she's uh what do you call it? An artist of some sort or an influencer or a vlogger. I don't know what she does, but she obviously seems to know a lot of very famous people in the rap world, in the sports world, in the entertainment world, and in the world of diplomats and billionaires and sheiks and royal family members and and oligarchs and I don't know, man. Honestly, I mean, it's kind of weird that she has this kind of network, but one could only assume maybe foreign intelligence of some sort or some kind of CIA asset, MI6, maybe. Whatever it is that she does, she she's none of the above. She's none of the above. Low level model whose biggest claim to fame was her numerous celebrity relationships. So this is a reason why Logan is with her in the first place, is because these people can't get with anybody else, right? Because either people want to use them for their fame, or either people are disgusted by their fame. And that is why I say that they are very limited in the scope of, let's say, the reality of what it is that they can have. So that's the only reason why Logan is with this girl. Kyrie, I think we both know how she got her notoriety among the elites. God save her. Yeah, man. But why is Logan with her? Right? What, like, here's the thing, right? If he was to be in a press conference with Dylan Dennis, and by the way, he's going to be in a press conference with him at some point because their fight is not until October. So, how is Logan Paul going to counter all this? Is he going to say, oh, well, I countered the misogyny of Dylan Dennis because Dylan Dennis doesn't believe that a woman doesn't have a choice to make or this and that. And I could see that being played into the fight promotion of some sort of way. I could really see that, right? Because really, that's the only thing that Logan can sit on, is the fact that, like, oh, well, they have a choice to do what they want. Or he could just play it out and say something to the effect where, yeah, but that was then and this is now. And also, you got to think, with all the pictures that I've seen Dylan Dennis have, in the Western mindset, I'm going to tell you from the Western and Muslim mindset, okay? The Western mindset, it's really, it's innocent, in all honesty. I mean, you got to think, okay, she took pictures with Ja Rule. She took pictures with 50 Cent. Oh, I'm sorry, not 50 Cent. Obviously, you might as well just throw him in there. I was just thinking about 50 Cent because Ja Rule was in there. LeBron. Who else was in there? A whole bunch of names that we mentioned. Nonetheless, the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, all those pictures seem innocent enough, right? You meet somebody famous, of course, naturally you're going to go take pictures with them, no matter who it is. If you met, I don't know, the Queen of England or something like that when she was alive, I'm sure most of you would go and take a picture with her. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything with her, but that's the innocent Western mindset. The Muslim mindset, I'll tell you, is that, yeah, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good when a girl is out there taking pictures with people and this and that. It's just not a good look, and it just doesn't make you look really any more of a man, really. Kyrie, I gotta say, you have a great ability to analyze the same topic for an extended period of time without it becoming boring or repetitive. I'm surprised you don't have thousands of subscribers. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Well, be sure to spread my content, and yeah, just let other people know. And of course, I'm working to build on that. That's how it is on YouTube, I guess. You try to build an audience, you try to build your subscribers, and eventually people will notice your talent. But if only one or a few people notice my talent, that's all right with me, as long as it's out there to a certain extent. Great content is always going to be great content. If it's great content, somewhere down the line, somebody's going to use it and say, hey, look what this guy said. Oh, about such and such. Suppose Sean Strickland goes off the hinges and gets into, I don't know, some really horrible situation where he's holding people hostage of some sort, in a hypothetical situation. Not that I'm saying that he won't or will ever do that, but then they'll use this clip and say, hey, look, this is what he said about such and such. But yeah, that's neither here or there. But yeah, thank you for that. I try to make content that I like to listen to, because like yourself, I'm a big podcast fan. I like to listen to different podcasts, And if you like listen to different podcasts and you want to do a content on YouTube or anywhere else, you try to make content that you like, right? So, or just spit out the things that you think about in your head that you think are interesting, and you put it on audio or video form. But yeah, that's pretty much Logan Paul and Dylan Dennis in a nutshell. I was actually going to make a separate video for that, but to close on that particular subject with Logan Paul and Dylan Dennis, these young kids, they don't have filter, right? So when you go out and you beef with them, this is literally what you're going to have to deal with in terms of the type of backlash and the type of media frenzy that you're going to experience with these new kids, right? They're going to dig deep into your life. They're going to look at your love life. They're going to attack your loved ones. And then lo and behold, here comes Logan Paul threatening to sue and even go as far as to pulling out of the fight with Dylan Dennis, because Dylan Dennis is just going way too hard on him, right? And not just Dylan Dennis, but Dylan Dennis is pretty much rallying up people against Logan Paul in this kind of way. And then in turn, it's kind of given Dylan Dennis's brand a positive outlook in a strange way, like a baby face turn while Logan is turning heel. So yeah, that's that. I bet the first thing Logan thought, okay, wait, you said something else here. I think Logan is so far down in the hole of godlessness. Does he possibly care about this public humiliation? Bet not. Does he care about this public humiliation? Yes and no. Yes and no. He cares enough to where if the narrative is somehow strong against him in a way where, like, okay, you know what? This really looks bad, where his agents start going to me, hey man, listen, this is really making you look bad. This is making you look less of a man. You know, we have all these manly bro guys that like to drink prime, that think they're the hottest thing since peanut butter and jelly, right? Like these are the type of guys that you advertise your product to, the guys that buy your stuff. So you're looking less of a man, and it's hurting your bottom dollar. Only then he'll care. Right now, he doesn't care, because the way that he can spin it is, well, she was with them and now she's with me. So that's how he's going to look at it. And then Gene writes, I bet the first thing Logan thought of was his PR. Yeah, that's within the context of exactly what I was saying in that particular matter at hand. Was that, yes, he does have a PR team that I'm sure is going to try to spin this. And by the way, public relations is actually one of my specialties in terms of career and degrees and whatnot. So I do have a bit of an understanding of how these things go and how they sway the public into thinking another way. Basically, public relations agents are battle rappers with college degrees in English and writing and journalism. That's the best way to really put them in that particular context. And guess what? That's what they're going to do for Logan Paul. They're going to spin this in a positive way. And there's a lot to spin about this in a positive way. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there that, I guess, how do I say this in a politically correct way, that encourage a certain type of behavior out of women per se. Okay. They're going to take that particular narrative. So, like, for example, the feminist people that are that are far to the left or whatever like that, they're going to take all these narratives and spin it in that way to make it favorable towards Logan. And then you look at Logan's audience. I mean, it's not really that far-fetched that is a reality, right? But nonetheless, I think that what this particular beef did, it made this fight a whole lot better. Because without this particular beef, what is it that we really have here? We have a jiu-jitsu guy who's never boxed before, and we're doing this in a boxing match. I think if they're going to really make this relevant, they should just do it in an MMA fight, right? Don't you think that this would have been better in an MMA fight? I mean, Logan can wrestle. Obviously, Logan has boxed. We don't know if Logan can kick. That's one aspect that I would never really have any critique on Logan on, because I've never really seen it. Like, obviously, we've seen him grapple Paulo Costa in a training session that they had together. We've seen him throw hands in a boxing match. We've seen him box Floyd Mayweather and all these other influencers. We know that he wrestled in high school and college, but I mean, we don't really know much about his kicking. So neither do we know too much about Dylan Danis's kicking. But that's why it would be an interesting MMA fight rather than a boxing match. Don't you think? Way better than a boxing match. But it's under DAZN Boxing, so they do what they have to do with that particular setting that they have going on with the rule set. Where was I going with this? I think Logan Paul. I think this is a blessing in disguise, because, look, without this banter that they have going on, it would have been really boring. There would be no interest in this fight. It would just be a celebrity boxing match. And guess what? A lot of these celebrity boxing matches, I'm sorry, they don't make that much money. I mean, even Jake Paul had some problems making money with Anderson Silva. Now, granted, I think they fought during a Super Bowl weekend or something to that extent. So there was a lot of problems that could go into the pay-per-view numbers with that. But if you're looking at other influencer boxing matches like the Misfits or Austin McBroom or Salt Bay Poppy or what's that Filipino guy's name? Salt Bay. I don't know. All these influencer guys, they don't make money. Okay, they have a following in let's say TikTok or Instagram or Twitter or anything like that. But in reality, they don't translate to pay-per-view numbers, because for a couple of reasons. For one, if you're talking about a TikTok influencer, an Instagram influencer, or this and that, you're talking about kids that are in their 20s that know how to get on VIPbox.tv or firstrow sports.ed or whatever, and they can just watch your fights for free. That's the technical savviness of a lot of these kids. And guess what? All these other older guys that really respect fighting, that respect what fighters do and what they go through, and are willing to pay their hard-earned money to see these guys perform, that's not the audience that these guys have. But the reason why I think Jake Paul and Logan Paul do great pay-per-view numbers in comparison to the other influencer boxers out there that a lot of us guys that are in our mid-30s have no idea who they are. The reason why Jake and Logan do so well is because of the opponents that they have. And then on top of the fact that I think there's a subconscious thought that we understand that these kids are sort of taking what they're doing seriously, right? You know what's funny? I have no idea what Salt Poppy or the other influencers make in terms of videos. I know them only from the combat world. Yeah, exactly. The same thing with Logan. I didn't know who Logan was until he got challenged into this boxing match with KSI. And then I didn't even know who KSI was. I'll tell you how I ran across this influencer boxing spear when I first ran across it. I remember watching YouTube one day, and I saw these two English guys, these two English kids. One of them was KSI, obviously, having a press conference, and it was a press conference and a weigh-in. So it was like they're having a press conference, and then they're having a weigh-in, and then they're going to have an amateur boxing match the next day. And the opponent of KSI at the time was none other than famous YouTuber Joe Weller, who was also from the UK. Him and what's his name? KSI got into a little beef. He did some like mocking boxing sparring online. I'm talking about Joe Weller. And so he called out KSI, and then eventually they ended up getting together and just having a boxing match to settle their beef. So there he is, KSI. He finishes off Joe Weller. He gets on the mic after that beef is squashed with him and Joe Weller, or was it squashed, or maybe they kept beefing after that because, these YouTube kids, they have no limit and no filter what they do. So then he goes and calls out Logan Paul and Jake Paul. Why? Because he had the biggest clout at the time. Now, prior to KSI calling him out, I had no idea who he was. And then I got to start looking up who this guy was. Okay, he's social media influencer. I was like, what does that even mean? Okay, he's an online guy. He does pranks. That's what they do best. Oh, but his brother does Disney, and then him and his brother collaborate, and then him and his brother don't collaborate anymore. And then on top of that, they also do rap music. They also spit. They also do videos. They also do music. They also do pranks, and then they also do vlogs and so on and so forth. They're just all over the place. Right? So that's one thing you got to appreciate about Logan Paul and Jake Paul is they are the two guys that don't believe in this aspect of staying in your own lane. And how has it worked out for them? For the positive and both for the negative, right? Because obviously that Jake has all these business ventures that he has to deal with, all these different like management obligations that he has to deal with. Now, as a fighter, he has to deal with these obligations of training, of recuperating, and then having the right nutritionist and having the right team around him. And Eugene writes here, it's crazy to think that these insanely rich and influential celebrity part-time fighters rose to the size that they did because of scripted YouTube drama and fake diss tracks. Yeah. Do you know that they're fake, or is it confirmed that they're fake, or is there some realism to that? Now, how about Jake Paul and Logan Paul earlier this week beefing in some kind of way, right? Where they got on Logan Paul's podcast and he talked about how, he's not really like loyal to his brother, or they got into it, or he's saying that Jake is a bad person because he didn't let me promote a Prime drink when he knows damn well that Jake was sponsored by Celsius, and he knew that that was going to be a conflict of interest, like as if somehow he had the power. Yeah, maybe Jake did have the power to do that, but let's think about that, right? You have one drink for a particular brand, right? We all know that some sports companies sponsor Gatorade, right? They're not going to deviate from that. And then from Gatorade, they're going to go with, I don't know, Body Armor. Remember when UFC had that going on with Kobe Bryant? They're not going to go with Pepsi or Sprite. Or how about this, right? If they're with Pepsi, they're not going to go with cola, right? I think they admitted it. They admitted that it was fake. Here's the thing. I don't think that particular beef that they had this week in their podcast, I don't think that's fake at all. I think there is some real animosity towards that. Now, what does beef mean? Does that mean that they're going to go out and get into a street fight or challenge each other when it's a sanctioned fight? No, I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know if I would call it beef, but more like leaking out their personal issues to the world that they would have solved privately in a weird way. And here's the dynamic that I sort of see with Jake Paul and Logan. Okay, here's something you got to understand about Logan Paul. You see, the way that I see Logan Paul, I don't see him as anybody that has any high moral compass whatsoever, right? I don't see him as somebody that holds honor to a code of any kind. I don't see Logan Paul as that at all. If you do, please feel free to disagree with me. But I think there's going to be a whole lot of people out there that would agree with me that Logan Paul is not the type of person that is trustworthy, or a person that is wholesome, or a person that is based, as the young Republican hipster kids like to say nowadays, right? He's not based in any kind of way whatsoever. Now, Jake, on the other hand, I think he has a bit of a different culture than Logan Paul. Now, would you guys say and agree that Jake is a lot more urban, a lot more hood, a lot more rugged than Logan? I think that's pretty apparent, isn't it? I think there's a lot of animosity and jealousy from both sides now. I'm referring to the diss tracks Jake and Logan made on each other in 2016 and 17, along with KSI and his groupies. They blew up from S. They I don't think that that's what blew them up per se. Obviously, look, I don't follow their careers enough. I'm way over 35 years old. I'm 38 years old. So by the time that they were doing what they were doing, I was only still in my mid 30s. So like I don't keep up with what they do. So I'm not sure exactly what made them blow up, but okay, if that's what made them blow up, I could see that. Now they're sort of in a different realm, right? Back then, they were in the realm of Disney. They were in the realm of, let's say, the YouTube world of kids that were part of that generation. They were in the combat sports world. In all honesty, the combat sports world is a little bit older in terms of its audience. And when I mean older, I mean guys that are going to be past 30, past 35, so on and so forth. Because in all honesty, it's not to say that young kids don't like fighting sports, but I think that for you to be a young guy to like fighting sports, you would have to do it yourself. And then the rest of us, I don't know. I guess I'm making generalizations of what an MMA fan is. And maybe I'm just speaking from anecdotal evidence of the group of friends that I have, when every time, like, one of your friends has one of the fights in their house, hey, you want to come over? Such and such has this or this and that. So maybe that's where I'm drawing that comparison from. The fact that, like, I have an older fan base. I mean, I have an older group of people that I watch the fights with. Okay, but that's neither here or there, right? Bottom line, Jake and Logan did gain more of an audience when they got into the combat sports world, and then when they started fighting MMA fighters, and then when they started getting into conflicts with Floyd. Writes, morally, I think Jake is superior by far in terms of boxing. Yeah, I agree. He helped women's boxing tremendously and actually put in a good effort for fighters to be treated better. Did you hear about Logan's anger about not being okay? I'm assuming yeah, you're going to write a follow-up on that. Yeah, Jake did definitely help women's boxing, right? Because Katie Taylor was at the top of her game, but there wasn't really anybody out there that was challenging her in a technical sense. Obviously, Amanda Serrano did, but we would have never known Amanda Serrano had it not been for Jake Paul. And why is that? Well, let's try to understand this, right? Serrano is a type of person that doesn't have a cell phone, right? She doesn't really use social media or anything like that. So this is a person that has a hard time promoting themselves. So as good as she is, she's never going to get a Katie Taylor fight up until she met Jake Paul, and Jake Paul promoted the living S out of her. And then here we are. Living S. Now she's a living S, as in superstar. And then my man MC Swags 2016 writes, yo, man, curious your thoughts on the Aljo versus Sean matchup. So my thoughts on that particular matchup, I could see Sean O'Malley banging Aljamain Sterling on the feet just within maybe the first couple of minutes of the round. But then eventually I can see Aljo taken over into wrestling and then taking him down over and over and over again. Now, MC Swags, I did mention this in one of my videos, and if you do look down on the description section of the of this YouTube video, I believe that I have a breakdown of my particular matchup on this one. But I'll just give you a brief stint of what I basically said. What I basically said in that video, and you could check it out also and see if it matches and correlates with what I'm about to say, is something to the effect of, if you've ever been in a jujitsu gym, or if you trained in a mixed martial arts gym where they're doing grappling sessions, you're usually switching up partners every 5 minutes, right? So you're with a new guy. So if you're training with the same person, and let's say if you get switched, 3 rounds down, you get switched up, and now you have the same partner that you had from round one, right? Let's say within that first round that you were uh grappling this guy, you constantly kept taking him down. Eventually it becomes a pattern. Then you start understanding, all right, I can take this guy down whenever I want. Okay, I took him down this way, I'm going to take him down here. He's a little bit more tired now. Okay, he obviously has no answer to any wrist control when I go and grab his leg for a single leg, so he's not going to be able to stop that. uh let's say if double leg was the thing that you're getting him down with, right? It's just this constant repetition of pattern that you start to build within your grappling transitions, that's going to help you to get the guy taken down over and over and over again, i.e., chain wrestling. So I can see Aljo doing that all throughout the entire night, right? While Sean is still banging him up on the feet, because I can't see Sean O'Malley getting finished in this fight, but I could see Aljo having to outpoint him due to the fact that he is just hard to knock out. And not only is he hard to knock out, he's durable. And I think he's going to have a lot of stamina and a lot of great preparation going into this fight. And here's something that I think is very underrated with Sean O'Malley: his preparation is extremely underrated. This guy has scientists that study his sleep. Okay, this is not like one of these things where he bought some machine online, these gadgets that like measure your heart rate or this and that. No, he literally has a scientist that works with a university that does data gatherings to do a study on the human body, and they're doing things with Sean O'Malley's sleep and trying to understand his patterns and recovery. This guy is ready. He is ready for this fight. But the thing is, that is what's going to make him tough. But is that what's going to make him skillful enough to win this fight? And I say no, because here's another thing that I said on the video, was that wrestling is one of those sports where you cannot, for the life of you, cheat or get lucky at it. Now, in boxing, you can get lucky. You can get lucky in boxing in ways that Francis Ngannou can get lucky in boxing, right? But you can never get lucky in wrestling. Like, for example, if I was to tell you that, okay, tomorrow you're going to go wrestle the 4-time national NCAA champion Kyle Dake, it's never going to happen. Kyle Dake is going to take you down and he's going to pin you, and you're not going to get a chance of even getting a single leg on him, or not even a transition or any point on him whatsoever in a wrestling match, because it's just what they do. It's a sport that requires you to constantly grind in order for you to constantly be updated on the game. And Aljo has been doing that since he was 5 years old. So that's what it is with that particular matchup. Gino writes, able to advertise his sports drinks on Jake's boxing event versus Diaz. He was angry at Jake having a different brand sponsor and came off very bitter. Yeah, definitely came off bitter. And then MC Swags, in response to what I mentioned about Sean O'Malley. Yeah, I agree. Sean needs to get it done quick before Aljo finds his rhythm. Yeah, that's literally what this is. He needs to knock him out before Aljo finds that rhythm within the transitions, within grabbing his legs, and the fact that he's able to constantly, get these close range exchanges that takes his back and then takes him down. And then eventually maybe Sean O'Malley will just give up his back, because, I mean, that's just what Aljo does, right? He finds ways for you to like somehow be vulnerable and somehow expose your back. And then MC Swags writes, yeah, Sean is highly technical. He definitely is highly technical on the feet. What Sean is he's an athlete, right? He is the quintessential American athlete. And what do I mean by that? Well, you look at his biography and what he has mentioned. He mentioned something to the effect of where growing up, he played baseball, he played soccer, and he played football. He played all these different sports, including basketball. He played all the sports. So the guy has a great coordination in understanding how to throw kicks and punches and how to adapt to martial arts in ways that would require you to be a taekwondo specialist in order for him to fight the way that he does. But that's Sean O'Malley for you in a nutshell. I hope Sean loses. I usually root for the guy that looks like me, but not tomorrow. Oh man, okay. Yeah, looks like me. Okay, I know what you mean by that. Sean is so uncool and such a terrible role model for children, which is his audience. So how about this, right? Sean O'Malley is a Takashi 6ix9ine fighter, and I notice a lot of guys in the fight game that have a little bit of a gangster lean are sort of not really in favor of this. They don't like the fact that he hangs out with Takashi 6ix9ine, but man, they love the fact that he hung out with Snoop Dogg. Right? Not only hung out with Snoop Dogg, but Snoop Dogg basically introduced him to the world and gave him his popularity. Now, who doesn't like Snoop Dogg? Right? A lot of the young kids look at Snoop Dogg as this friendly looking grandfather of an OG type of thing. But if you grew up in the 90s and you understood the song Murder Was the Case, you know that Snoop was a real one. And what I mean by real one, like he was one of those guys that really rapped about what he was living. Okay. Like Murder Was a Case that was inspired by a situation that he had going on where he met a rival gang member at a park and him and his bodyguard, well, they did what they did. I urge you guys to take a look at that particular story with Snoop Dogg and his bodyguard and what had happened with the murder case that Snoop had to fight. And eventually he got acquitted, which only rose the legend of Snoop Dogg, only rose the notoriety of Death Row Records, and in turn, it helped Tupac Shakur in his career in that. Behind a cotton candy head is an open relationship, weed addiction, and self-righteous man in denial. Well, fair play to Sean. He did say that he did cut down on weed for a whole month for this particular fight. And with the open relationship thing, is that true? Because I know that he has said that, but then he also said on the Nelk Boys podcast something to the effect where, yeah, well, she's not going anywhere, but at the same time, I can do whatever I want, or this or something to that effect. But rumor has it it's not his child. Rigo had a good video on this. Oh, okay. Yeah. I did hear about that. I did hear about Rigo. He's one of the new guys on the scene right now in the MMA content circles. And I did hear about that video, although I'm skeptical, right? And the reason why is because you got to understand the difference between other MMA YouTubers and other combat sports YouTubers in comparison to me is that I'm not going to say things out of sensationalism unless it's called for, right? With these other channels, what they do is they do call for sensationalism because guess what? They want to attract the dopamine in your brain for you to listen to their scandal that they want to report to the world or supposed scandal. But again, I don't know if that's true or not. That's neither here or there. Gino, I agree with you. I would not live my life the way he does, but he is a striker to watch and brings the views. Yes, strikers do bring the views in the MMA world. Obviously, that would be a great debut for Michael Venom Page if he was to come into the UFC, just adding a whole different striking dynamic into the UFC. I think Michael Venom Page was a Taekwondo or a karate specialist, and I believe a national British karate champion at that. And then you look at Sean O'Malley, the way that he fights, you think that he is a national champion at karate or taekwondo as well. But in reality, he is the quintessential American athlete that I just mentioned to you guys that can learn on the fly. And that is exactly why Sean O'Malley looks like the way that he does when he goes and fights out there, right? He's able to bring a certain swag to him because of his years of having these different sports and and different athletic background behind him. Uh, it is true yeah, many women, but he's taken out his Peaches saying that his wife isn't going anywhere. He contradicted this statement in a different interview, talking about having coffee with a man who was with his wife. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I meant when I said the Nelk Boys podcast that he did for this week's Fight Media. It does seem contradictory to what he has said before, but then you also got to think, all fighting aside, do you honestly think Sean O'Malley is a type of guy that is solid in his beliefs or anything like that? Or is he just a guy that just goes with the flow? Oh, okay, well, this is hot. We're going to go with this, like this and that. You know what's funny? I hear him and his coach, Tim Welch. By the way, shout out to Tim Welch. I think he's a great coach. I think he's very smart. I think he's perfect for Sean O'Malley. But man, have you guys heard their podcast? It's quite interesting, right? They get into these philosophical stories and this and that. And while they get into these philosophical stories, I could just hear both of them kind of encouraging each other as they're both just, having this cipher of different ideas. They're both bouncing around each other. And all I could picture them doing is going, oh, whoa, what? Oh, what? Like just surprised with everything that they do. Is surprised with everything that they say with each other. Like they're just, but I think this is the reason why they have a great dynamic as a coach and as a fighter is, they know, they know how to, what's the word I'm looking for here? They know how to excite each other's dopamine, right? And that's the best way to really put it with their relationship as coach and fighter. I'm not denying Sean's star power at all. If he wins, it'll be huge for his profile in the UFC. Yeah, you definitely got that right. It will definitely be huge for the UFC. It would be Connor Jose Aldo like. But I cannot support him. However, I will be rooting for Aljamain Sterling. Yeah, I think the hardcore MMA fans are rooting for Aljamain Sterling, and I think the guys that, as you call in the right wing, hipster based, young boys lingo based, right? Aljamain Sterling seems more of the based guy here than Sean O'Malley. I think that's not really disputed in any kind of way. Sean is a reflection of the modern generation that you see today. Imagine spinning head kicks. Imagine spinning head kick KO from Sean. You mean doing yeah? That's O'Malley will be the man in terms of pay-per-view. You know what? You're absolutely correct. Because what about Conor McGregor? Right? Obviously, there's the Chandler fight, but then after the Chandler fight, what's going to happen after that? Are you going to have Justin Gaethje after that? And then after that, you're going to have Nate. Listen, Conor McGregor could possibly lose all three of those fights, right? But at this point, it doesn't matter anymore, especially for the UFC's bottom line. Because if, let's say, these are going to be Conor's 3 last MMA fights, they're all going to be blockbuster hits. Michael Chandler is already a blockbuster hit. Maybe not the way that Justin Gaethje would have been or the Nate Diaz fight was and will be in the future. But Michael Chandler's promotion in the Tough House, and not only in the Tough House with the little banter that they have going on, and then the fact that McGregor was playing mind games, saying that he probably wasn't going to fight him anyway. And then ends up finding out in the Anthony Joshua fight that they are going to fight in December. But then he's saying that, like, well, I have to, or this and that. So there seems to be some kind of story behind that. Maybe he tried to pitch to the UFC. Maybe I'll just go fight someone else. Maybe it's better that way. But then the UFC was like, well, we invested so much money on Tough, so you can't get out of that now. Nonetheless, all of these are big money fights to which it doesn't matter whether Conor wins or loses, because the UFC is going to get their bottom dollar in these 3 fights. But after those 3 fights, that's it. So this is why the comment right here with Gene, O'Malley will be the man in terms of pay-per-view. Because once Conor is gone, that's just really it. You know, when he's gone, we're going to need a new star. And just like what I mentioned in the Manchester City video, right, where I compared Manchester City, one of the greatest soccer teams in all of its history because of the resources that they have through the UAE government. Okay, they constantly bring in the best players because, for one, they can afford it. And number 2, they are already the top champions in the Premier League and the Champions League and all these different categories and different leagues that they play at in terms of international level, domestic level. I mean, they are just the best team all around. But they constantly change players, just like the UFC and just like Conor McGregor. They retire. They go out of commission. They wear out. They become injury prone and later on to their career, and they need to be replaced. And they always find people to replace. Well, Sean O'Malley is going to be that guy that's going to replace Conor McGregor in terms of pay-per-view numbers, right? So let's take a look at the rest of the card for UFC 292. So obviously Neil Magny and Ian Garry are in there now, right? We got that in there. Who else we got in here? Weili Zhang is in the card, and I predicted that Weili Zhang is going to get a knockout in this. Look, the way that I see Weili Zhang, she just has this torque power that I think made her perfect for striking. She's got strong body kicks, strong low kicks, and then on top of that, she's got devastating head kicks. She's got knockout power on both hands. I just don't see how she's going to do anything different in this particular fight, especially with somebody like Amanda Lemos, right? She's 36 years old, okay? Yes, has the longer reach. She definitely has the longer reach in this one, both the same height. And the record is, well, I wouldn't say they're identical to any stretch of the imagination, right? But Weili Zhang is way more experienced. Yeah, MC Swag says the Ian Neal beef is funny. It is funny because look, I want to get to that right now, okay? I was going to get to that later, but I'll just get to this right now. I'm going to tell you why that beef is particularly funny because, for one, I think it brought a different conversation to the fold, right? In terms of raising your kids. Have you guys ever been to a restaurant where the kid and their parents just seem to not have any control? The kid is just screaming out of nowhere. It's like, I want this, or I want that, or this and that. And oftentimes you notice that they're, how do I say this? Well, they're San Francisco liberals. And trust me, that's the most politically correct way I can put it, right? Because let's just say it like this, right? With an Arab family, you act up, okay, it's not going to go well for you. You do that to a Mexican family and you act up, it's not going to go well for you. Okay. And then MMA Guru, if you guys listen to him, he mentioned something that was very interesting about this particular beef and this particular scenario, right? He says that if you're in a poor or working class environment like he was growing up in London as a Welshman and dealing with poverty or dealing with trying to make ends meet, And then you deal with the fact that because you come from a working class background or you come from a minority background, that you can't slip up. The police are going to come after you and they're watching you. So you can't slip up. So the way that these parents behave towards their kids, they don't let up on anything. Okay. They're going to go to what some may perceive as the extreme when it comes to disciplining their children because they can't afford for them to mess up. Now, in the middle class divisions of the world, when I mean middle class, I don't mean middleweight. I mean middle class as in your class that you belong to, right? Whether you're rich, you're poor, working class, elite class, that class that I'm talking about. When you're in a middle class, kids in that particular part of the demographic sphere of things can afford to go to jail because they have lawyers on tap. They can afford to break things. In other words, that's why you see a lot of them go on protests and create mayhem and riots and this and that. Because guess what? If they were to get captured by the police, they can make bail. Whereas if you come from a working class background, that's usually not the case. Gina writes, real Christians are so lost. Women are priests and pride flags have invaded some churches. They wear the dead suit of religion and parade around in mockery. Yeah, I agree. And, one may argue this is a reason why us Muslims are gaining numbers in Europe, because you got to think, right? Tommy Robinson. Do you guys know who Tommy Robinson is? Write on the comment section if you guys know who Tommy Robinson is. If you don't know, let me give you guys a brief summary on who he is. Tommy Robinson was the former leader of the EDL, the English Defense League. He created the English Defense League to counter Muslim gangs in his town of Luton. Oh, by the way, in the same town of which he grew up with none other than that man from Romania who was a former Englishman, who I would rather not say his name because his name brings so much controversy to you. But yeah, he grew up with Andrew Tate, okay, in Luton. And he was a leader of the English Defense League. So basically, to make long story short, his whole entire MO is that he goes against Muslim gangs and whatnot, right? And so basically he gets in this controversy. So then he gets called a racist. He gets called an anti-Islamophobe. Gino writes, Muslims don't take S. White people fall for typos too easily. Okay, so what you said there, honestly, I think applies a lot with the Jake Paul and Logan Paul situation. Because look, how does Logan Paul approach his life? He approaches his life the way that you had just mentioned, the second people that you just mentioned right now. Okay. Now you look at Jake Paul on the other hand. Jake Paul, on the other hand, has this aspect of hanging out with kids from, how do I say this, the urban background. And by the way, I think Jake is what you would call an honorary, brother. He's an honorary ninja. Okay, you look at the guys that he hangs out with, you look at all the staff that he has in Better, you look at all the people that are in his training camp. Jake is in a different ethos than Logan. Logan is a Southern California boy, okay? Whereas Jake Paul is a hood Ohio dude, and he maintains that. So they have a different ethos of going about things. Logan Paul, on the other hand, he'll fall for anything as long as it makes him money. That's why he goes and hangs out with the enemy of Jake Paul, with none other than KSI. Until this day, Jake Paul is puzzled as to how he can do business with somebody like that, a guy that they initially had started beef with. But money talks nonetheless. Now, I think Jake is not one of those guys that will just do anything for money, because for one, he already has money, and that's that. But I didn't want to get off the tangent. What I was saying about Tommy Robinson was that he said that the toughest Englishmen today are Muslims. In other words, he's saying that a lot of English people are converting to Islam in England because of these things that you're mentioning, right now. Uh, Trusting the media made Christians weak. Obviously, not all of them. Yeah, obviously not all of them. But when you mean not all of them, you're talking about the ones that don't fall into the category of, let's say, the, how do I say this, the mainstream world of things, right? They don't fall into the ABC, the BBC, or the MSNBC, the Fox News aspect of the world. Obviously, Fox News was known to be right wing at some point, but now you see a lot of right wing pundits sort of hint that they're sort of leaning left in some kind of way. And then the exit of Tucker Carlson sort of highlights that reality. But yeah, that's there's some truth to that, right? That's really what you have going on in that particular situation, right? So um let's move on to the card with this one, and then we'll obviously continue on with those topics as well. Damon Blackshear taking on Mario Batista. How about Sean O'Malley today at the press conference calling for Cody Garbrandt? He's like, hey, where's Cody Garbrandt at? Now, could you imagine what that press conference would have been like had, let's say, Cody Garbrandt was there, because him and Sean O'Malley sort of have this beef going on. And, well, that fight never came to fruition. Obviously, I would have loved to have seen Cody fight Sean O'Malley at some point. But yeah, that's neither here or there. Damon Blackshear fought literally last week, just like Robert Helenius the week before he fought Anthony Joshua. He was in a heavyweight boxing match in some castle somewhere in the Nordic regions of the world, right? And then he gets called. He's like, hey, we need you to fight Anthony Joshua. Well, the same thing that's happening here with Damon Blackshear and Mario Batista. Damon Blackshear just came off of being the third guy to pull off a twister submission. Obviously, one of them was, I believe, who was it? It was Korean Zombie, and then I forgot who the other guy was. But yeah, he's the third guy in the UFC's history to pull off uh, a twister. Now, Mario Batista was originally supposed to take on Cody Garbrandt. I'm really interested to see this fight only because of the fact that I want to see how Blackshear deals with the 1 week preparation. I mean, how do you deal with a situation like this, right? You fought a week before. What do you do for this week? I guess you just chill. You just try to make weight, and then you hope for the best. But sometimes, you know what? You take the likes of Michael Bisping, right? He got called to fight Luke Rockhold while he was shooting a movie, and then before you know, he becomes world champion, right? So yeah, it's a crazy situation that he's in. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how Damon Blackshear gets on with this one. What, so many atheists are victims of policies that they vote for. I can't go deep into it because of YouTube's policy, but Martin Luther has a good book explaining what's happening. Okay, I'll be sure to check out that book. Right on the comment section the name of that book. And then everyone is sleeping on the Pedro Munoz fight. Oh yes. Uh, are When you say they're sleeping on that fight, are you saying they're sleeping on it because it's not getting enough notoriety, or do you think that they're sleeping on it because Pedro Munoz has a great chance of taking out Chito Vera in this, right? Because that's kind of what I see going on here. I could actually see Pedro Munoz winning this one. Blackshear, Thug Nasty, Zombie are the yes, that's right. Thug Nasty, yes. Bryce Mitchell was the other one. Of course, it would be Bryce Mitchell. Man, he's got nasty jiu-jitsu game. So yeah, of course it would be Bryce Mitchell on that one. But who wins this one with Mario Batista and Blackshear? Well, let's see. Mario Batista, 12-2, seems to be a hot prospect in the bantamweight division right now. Damon Blackshear, obviously, we know has a great submission. I think that he's going to be very sharp going into this fight because coming from 1 week prior and then fighting again the next week, I think has some benefits into zeroing in your range. Okay. So I don't know how they fire guns in the civilian world in terms of how they I think there's this thing in the military called happy trigger, or getting your range in sight, like basically setting your sights, right? So there's this term in the military when it comes to your rifle, right, where you're setting your sights. So let's say you're in basic training in the Marine Corps, right? And it's rifle week, or it's qualifications rifle week, and you're shooting your rifles to qualify. Okay, so one of the things that the primary marksman instructors teach you is that you have to zero in your sights, meaning that, like, if you know anything about like the sights of the gun or the rifle, or it's or where you aim at, and it's and where you basically sort of how do I say this, like where you're basically like zeroing in your sights, right? You're basically adjusting the sights, that little thing where you sort of like turn the knob or whatever. But that's, yeah, zeroing in your sights is very very important when you're going into shooting for your qualifications, right? And so let's say if you're shooting for another qualifications, let's say a few months down the road, right, your rifle's going to be a little bit different, so then you got to go and zero in your sights again, right? Well, what Damon Blackshear is dealing with going into this fight, he's got his sights zeroed in already. So, in other words, he's got his weapons ready. But having your weapons ready in a mixed martial arts fight is not the only thing that you have to worry about, because then you have to worry about cardio. How does his cardio deal with this? Did he eat or overeat a certain amount of food that could affect his performance going into this matchup? Because you have to think, how many days notice did he get this fight? Maybe like a couple of days. And then you also have to think, it's only a few hours away now from the weigh-ins, because right now it's 1 a.m. here in the West Coast, and weigh-in times is going to be approximately 4 hours from now. Okay, so if you're in the Boston area right now, you're probably what is this? Probably 4 o'clock, right? So 8 o'clock is when they're going to start the clock in the East Coast for their weigh-ins, right? So he may have some issues weighing in, right? Because, okay, the only thing that he has to worry about in this particular week after fighting a week prior is cutting weight. That's all that he has to worry about. He just has to cut weight. But how much weight, and how much of that weight is going to affect him going into the fight? So that's what I'm curious about with Damon Blackshear and Mario Batista. The sleeping on Munoz's talent. He looked better against O'Malley in round one than Yan did. Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, so that is exactly why I'm picking him over Cheeto Vera in this particular matchup. And with Damon Blackshear, I'm going to go with Damon Blackshear on this one. I could see him edge out a decision on this one, because he's just going to look sharper just based on the fact that he was just coming off of a fight. So I think that's going to help. And yeah, with Pedro Munoz and Marlon Cheeto Vera, we had mentioned. So it seems that they're going to be the card opener for this one. Neil Magny and Ian Garry, the most interesting beef in the entire fight card. Like I said, I'm going to go with Ian Garry on this one. Look at Neil Magny right here, right? 28 wins, 11 losses. So we're looking at 1939 some odd fights in his career. This is going to be his 40th fight. He's been in there for quite some time, right? And Ian Garry has looked way sharp with his head kick that he landed against Rodriguez in their last fight. And by the way, that fight was, I believe, in North Carolina, right? Out of all places, North Carolina. You put an Irishman in North Carolina, but fair play. it was a great turnaround for him to come back to Boston to fight in front of an Irish American crowd at that. I think this is Ian Garry's time. I don't agree with his narrative, obviously, because he's just trying to create some sort of fight hype out of this. Now, whether he really believes that or not is another question for a psychologist to figure out. But I think we all know it's just pre fight banter. But at the same time, you really have to believe it because like all generals that have propagandized their troops to war, they really have to have their guys believe in what they do in order for them to succeed. So I think Ian Garry, in his mind, truly believes that Neil Magny is an abuser of some sort, and he wants to make him pay for it. But hey, whatever gets you through the fight, right? You know, that's the name of the game. So yeah, Jeff Neal was supposed to be in that fight. It got canceled. Cody Garbrandt, obviously, with his injury that he had to pull out. And then Chris Weidman versus Brad Tavares. By the way, if you guys are on this channel right now, I urge you guys to take a look at my video that I did with Chris Weidman. I titled it, what did I title this? Chris Weidman was Khamzat and Orlando Anderson, which Orlando Anderson was a Tupac shooter, and here's why. I don't see Chris Weidman winning this one, in all honesty. What do you guys think about that particular matchup? I'm very curious about what people think about this, and I think a lot of people are going to be unanimous in this pick. Although there are people out there that say that Chris Weidman is a former champion, and he is 39 years old. He is a little bit older, but you know, you can do well at an older age at 185, so you never know. I think Brad Tavares is going to try to kick his legs in. And I think Chris Weidman is worried about it. And I think it's great to do breakdowns like this after a press conference or after a media. I'm going to tell you why. I think one of the most underrated things that a lot of MMA fans forget to take a look at, and a lot of MMA observers, and how about gamblers, right? Obviously, I'm a Muslim, I don't gamble, but if you're a gambling man, I'm very surprised that a lot of these guys don't look at interviews or media day scrums or anything like that, because you can really go inside of a fighter's soul to try to understand what kind of fight you're going to get out of them when you watch and listen to these things. Okay, so what did I pick up from Chris Weidman in the press conference today? He jokingly says, hey, man, don't kick me or this and that in this leg or this. And I'm like thinking, okay, I get you're joking, but for you to say that, there's something to that, right? I mean, I think subconsciously, you know, they say that every joke, there's some truth to it. Obviously, Chris Weidman is joking, but there's some truth to it. He really does not want to get kicked in that leg because, let's face it, he didn't go out there and take steroids the way Conor McGregor did or the way that Anderson Silva did when his leg break happened. Chris Weidman is in a USADA pool in a way that that Conor McGregor is not, meaning that Conor has been clean his whole entire career. Okay? Clean his whole entire career, but it does not mean that just because he was clean his entire career that he's going to be clean this time, especially after a leg break from the Dustin Poirier fight. Okay, so Tavares went to war with Duplessis and has an incredible takedown defense. I don't see a path of victory for Old Dog. Yeah, and I think that the way that Chris Weidman is framing himself going into this fight, there's an aspect of what I would consider, how do I say this? Main character syndrome. Because why do I call it a main character syndrome? When I'm talking about Chris Weidman going into this fight. For one, at some point, Chris Weidman had to return, right? But like what I said in the Manchester City video, and how I compared Manchester City's roster to the UFC roster, where they're constantly putting the best versus the best, and then having these guys play with each other in practice to fight for starting positions. It's just a highly competitive world. So Chris Weidman comes back to the UFC. He takes on Brad Tavares, who, just like what you mentioned here, went to war with Duplessis and has incredible takedown defense. So what's going to happen if Chris Weidman can't take him down? He's going to kick him off. He's going to kick his legs in. And Chris Weidman did jokingly say in the press conference today, hey, don't kick my leg or this and that. But he's going to kick your leg. And it's the path to victory that he's going to take. And it's going to be a tragic ending for Chris Weidman. And it's a shame because his teammate really has a great chance in winning this fight. And it's going to be one of those situations where one team member wins and the other doesn't. I've been in that position before. I've done a kickboxing match, an amateur kickboxing match, where almost like all of our team members had a clean sweep that night, with just the exception of like the two guys. Obviously, it didn't really affect the two guys in any kind of way. They still came and went and rendezvoused with us right after. You know, they were just still as happy as anybody else. But, you know, imagine if you had a teammate that took losses very harshly, and then you guys were on the same card, and then you had to deal with that. Now, how about the fact that Chris Weidman is going in first before Aljo, right? There's guys out there like Anthony Pettis that have mentioned how seeing their brother on the same card as them affected them in a negative way. Yeah, kind of crazy of him to announce he's going to go on another title run, but that's the confidence you have to have coming off a leg break at 41 years old. 41. Okay, you're exaggerating. I literally have his age on the screen right now. He's 39 years old. Why do we do that? Why do we make people seem a lot older than what they are when we're describing how old they are? Okay, I guess it's a way to kind of exaggerate their age and whatnot, kind of like how they exaggerate about Ian Garry's wife, right? They say, oh, she's 50 years old or this and that. I'm like, well, what do you mean 50 years old? I'm like, she's like in her 30s or this and that. But that's neither here or there. How about Ian Garry calling and this Ian Garry Neil Magny beef, I think, is the best beef in the entire card, right? Because we've already broke down their fight. We already talked about it, but then we keep going back to it. So it's obviously going to be the most interesting fight of the night. Hopefully they do get performance of the night to a certain degree. But yeah, he said something to Neil Magny that was really weird. He said, oh, you're old or this and that. But do you realize, Ian Garry, that you calling Neil Magny old, what kind of conversation are you going to have with your wife when you get home, realizing that she's 5 years older than Neil Magny? So what is she going to say? Oh, well, you think he's old, but I get it. She probably understands that it's the fight game, it's the fight business. This is what you do. And then obviously you're dealing with a kid like Ian Garry who grew up idolizing Conor McGregor, but once again, it doesn't mean he's trying to be Conor McGregor. I mean, these guys come from the same city. Like what I said earlier, they're going to sound the same. What does that say? I'm not counting him out just because he's 46. I just think it's a tough fight. Oh man. So he aged 5 more years after that, right? So he aged 2 more years, 39 to 41. And then from 41 to 45, man, yeah, Chris Weidman's just really aging before our very eyes here, right? And he's probably going to age even more if Brad Tavares really puts it on him in this one. He said to Magny, you're old, you lose to everyone, and you're boring. How bad does Ian Garry look if he loses? Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? I don't put too much stock into that. You know, a lot of people do put stock into, well, what's going to happen if you lose or this and that. Well, look, you knew that you were going to go in whether you're going to win or lose. And when you go in there, even if you know in your mind that your opponent is better than you and you know that that they have the upper hand, you're not going to say that out loud, really. It wouldn't be a good look to go out there and say it out loud. But yeah, that's neither here or there. But still, you're going to go out and fight your heart out. And you're going to tell people that you're the best and that you're going to do it. And I mean, that's just what it is, right? You know, the fight game, yes, it's a game full of people with main character syndrome, but guess what? Eventually, those people with main character syndrome ending up finishing the mission and the entire game itself and unlock things like a video game, right? Um, but let's see, what are some other fights here? You got Kurt Holloway and Austin Hubbard. Obviously, this is the Ultimate Fighter finale for this one. Austin Hubbard, wasn't he that guy that quit on the bar on the stool? Okay, yeah, this is the ultimate. No, this is the Ultimate Fighter final right here with Brad Katana and Cody Gibson. Brad Katana obviously is training partner of Conor McGregor, but I believe he was in Team Chandler for this particular show. So yeah, that's kind of interesting how that plays out like that. I don't think his wife cares at all. Fun fact, she is in the media business and is in charge of Ian's socials and sponsorship promotions. That's what I've heard. I wonder if she came up with the "you're an abuser" narrative. Did she come up with that? Yes. Yes, she did. I'm going to say that right now. I think that she did. I agree with you. You know what? I didn't think of it like that. But as somebody who's a public relations agent, yeah, I would probably tell my client that too. Like, hey, look, this is what we got going on. Okay, if you say this, you can bring this up, and then you can bring this up. And then after you win this fight next week, you're going to be at a child abuse center or of some sort, or a juvenile center of some sort, where you you talk to disprivileged kids, and then it's going to make your brand look good, and then it's kind of in brand with Ian Garry, right? Obviously, we know that Conor does charities, but at the same time, Conor is not the type of person to go and travel to Africa to take care of sick kids or anything like that. But Ian Garry is sort of on brand with being that type of guy. So I could see his wife being in the media business and, yeah, being a public relations agent and then being his manager and agent all together, telling him this to basically build some sort of hype for this fight. And it worked, because look what we're doing right now. We're talking about them more than anybody. Obviously not more than Logan Paul and Dylan Dennis. I think we spent a lot of time talking about that, but why should we not? I mean, it's the most interesting beef that we got going on in combat sports right now. And you want to talk about comeback. Now, how much of a big comeback that would be for Dylan Dennis if he was to pull off a win on that one, right? Think about that. He wins that one, and it's like back to being on top again, like when he was Conor McGregor's right hand man, jiu-jitsu coach during Conor McGregor's 2016 run, right? He's back to there again, but now back this time as an active fighter and as a new debut boxer. Now he's got a new venture under his belt, because Dylan has done jiu-jitsu fights. He's been a world jiu-jitsu champion, world jiu-jitsu runner-up, and then now he gets into boxing. He's fought MMA and Bellator. So it's just a new notch under his belt. But then not only that, he has the same redemption story that Logan was able to pull off after that Japan scandal in the forest, only for Logan to come back with a boxing match and then eventually get a WWE deal and then eventually get a fight with Floyd Mayweather because of that. Tough was awful. LOL. Conor disappointed, and only reason he'd go to Africa is to make it snow. I'm Kenyan, and if you know what, yeah, okay, yeah, to make snow, yeah, Conor. Oh my god, oh my goodness. Did you see the documentary with Conor when on Netflix when he was in the, I believe, the swamps down south? It looked like he was like trying to taunt an alligator of some sort. I thought that was sort of strange, the way he was the way he was trying to intimidate the alligator in some kind of way. But again, that's sort of on brand with what Conor does, right? Why would Conor not taunt an alligator and get down on a prone position, like as if he was back in the days when he was with Idio Pator, that movement Israeli guy that helped them do all these backflips and all these different movements that he does. I think Conor needs to get back to that. I think that's where Conor was really at his prime, was when he was able to do these different movements and these different um, these different dexterities that he was building from back in the days. You didn't really see much of that in the Dustin Poirier fight, did you? It was very like plotting boxing stance that he had, very flat-footed in a way, right? So we didn't really see much of Conor like that, and then we're probably going to see less of that now that he's a little bit heavier. But we'll see. We'll see what kind of Conor we're going to see out of the Michael Chandler fight. I believe that fight is going to be held for December of some sort. And then moving on to the card, we have Gregory Rodriguez taking on Denis Tololian, 185, 77-inch reach, 6'2", 13-5 for Gregory Rodriguez, and then 10-7 for Denis Tololian. And then you have on the early cards, let's take a look at what's on the early cards. Andrea KGB Lee taking on Natalia Silva, and then Gerald Mearshad taking on Andre Petrosky. Yeah, I see Gerald Mearshad getting a decision win on this one, right? He's a savvy veteran, has been in a lot of fights, has been knocked out by Khamzat, has had the most submissions in middleweight history. Can he submit Andre Petrosky? That's a good question. Let's take a look at some stats from Andre Petrosky. Okay? Andre Petrosky. So, Andre Petrosky, let's see here. 32 years old, out of Springfield, Pennsylvania, was a former heroin addict and got clean in 2018. Okay, let's see here. So he's never been submitted, has been knocked out once in the LFA in the regionals. Okay, so this is a very tough individual to finish. I don't see Gerald Mearshad knocking him out, but I see Gerald Mearshad being the savvy veteran that I had just mentioned earlier and outgrinding him for a decision win. That's how I see this particular fight. But finishing him, it's very far-fetched. Now, can he finish Gerald Mearshad? Yes, but I think Gerald Mearshad is going into this fight knowing that he's been knocked out before, knowing that he's been in different situations of different decisions and has submitted guys. I think you're going to see this fight play out everywhere. You're going to see this fight play out in the clinch. You're going to see this fight get played out on the feet, on the range. You're going to see this fight get boring and technical for a certain amount of time. But then you're going to see Gerald Mearshad show that he is a savvy veteran and probably try to grind him up against the cage, try to score some points, try to get takedowns on top of that. And then you have in the card opener, Myrana Moraz taking on Karen Silva to start off the card. So that's basically the entire card of that particular matter at hand. So let's see here. Conor, Nate, Poirier, Jones, Stipe, Max, Aldo, and Tony. The generations of stars that I've watched are falling off. Yeah, that's a good point, right? And just like what I mentioned in the video of Manchester City and the UFC, I think that's the nature of the game, right? I had mentioned in the Manchester City video where Manchester City has had all these top players over the years, right? If you know anything about soccer, they had the names like Aguero, they had names like Raheem Sterling. Now those guys are gone for one reason or another. Maybe their contracts have run out. Maybe they didn't want to re-sign them. They wanted to focus on younger players to continue the winning streak that they had going on. That's just the UFC in a nutshell, which is why I made a video comparing Manchester City's roster to the UFC because they're going to constantly bring the best guys in the world, and they're going to expend their resources to do it because these things happen. Look at the names that you just mentioned. Connor, around 34, 35 years old now. Nate, 38. Poirier, same age as Connor, 34. Jones, 35, 36. Stipe, near 40. Max, still young, but has a lot of mileage under him. Aldo, I had mentioned Khabib has said that this guy was going to fall off, and lo and behold, here he is in influencer boxing, right? Because you can't be that old in a lower weight class like that. And who did we replace Aldo with? Well, how about the featherweight division? You have Volkanovski. For every Aldo, there's a Volkanovski. For every Jens Pulver, there's going to be a Ben Henderson. And then for every Ben Henderson, then there's going to be an Anthony Pettis. And then after Anthony Pettis, there's going to be a Conor McGregor. And then from Conor McGregor, there's going to be Khabib. Now Khabib is gone. There's Islam. And then if Islam is gone, then there's Armin Sarukian, so on and so forth. That's the name of the game, right? You're replaceable. And I think that's one of the most beautiful elements of combat sports is that, man, no matter what, it's always changing and it's always evolving. And it doesn't care who you are because it's the ultimate meritocracy. I have a RoboCop. He had an insane fight with Chitty and can grapple. Okay. And then I don't see GM3 getting a decision. Every win he's ever got since he's joined the UFC has been a finish. Petrosky is no joke as a grappler, but neither is GM3. Yeah, that's so everything that you just pointed out right there, that's exactly the reason why I see this fight going to a decision for GM3. Because, yeah, he is no joke. He is a great grappler, but I don't know, man. It's just something tells me that GM3 is going to pull off something in terms of the distance, right? In terms of fighting this out to the distance. And I think that at some point, you got to realize that you can't finish everybody, right? So when you can't finish everybody, you have to be very technical. And I think this is one of those wrinkles that you're going to see out of GM3. He's going to have to be tested in terms of being technical and having to use his wrestling skills to outgrind his guy, maybe even outpoint him on the boxing side. But we'll see. So that's all I have for the night. That is the rest of the card. By the way, Boston fans are some of the craziest sports fans there is. Now, the thing is, are they an MMA or are they a boxing town the way that they are these mainstream sports town? Yeah, in a way they are. I would say that the Boston has been a staple for UFC events now for a couple of years. If you remember back, that's where Stipe had first fought Francis Ngannou, right? And then you had Conor McGregor fight Max Holloway there back in the day. Jeez, Daniel Rodriguez just popped. He did for which one? The Ian Garry fight? Well, I'm sure Ian Garry has a lot to say about that. I mean, I don't know why he would. I mean, he finished the guy already, but in Michael Bisping's case, he obviously still talks about Vitor Belfort because of the fact that Vitor Belfort kicked his head in and basically made him go blind in one eye. And Vitor was hyperly juiced at the time. But yeah, man, a lot of people are getting caught nowadays, right? For better or worse. Obviously, you had the Dylan White situation on the boxing side. And then you had Amanda Brommer, I think, or Amanda Gardner or something like that. I think, yeah, some other female American boxer had popped also. And now Daniel Rodriguez. But like, again, man, that's why they call it the theater of the unknown. You never know what you're going to get inside the cage, but you're also never know what you're going to get outside of the cage as well. Welcome to the drama that is known as combat sports. One more comment here. Of GM3's 35 wins, 33 were by finish. I had no idea he was such a killer. And let's not forget about the PFL drug scandal. Yeah. Yeah, man. You know, by the way, if you're interested in this subject, take a look at my video on the Dylan White versus Anthony Joshua card being canceled, where I talk about the truth of drug testing in the UFC and boxing. And I'll briefly talk about it right now. So what it is that with the UFC and with boxing, the reason why they have drug testing is for the simple fact that they want to have a checklist of insurances just in case anything goes wrong. So obviously, we know that in boxing, deaths happen far more than they would ever happen in, let's say, mixed martial arts, because of the fact that you have to take continuous blows to the head. So yes, these things happen in boxing. People die in MMA as well, but not to the degree and the rate and the historical evidence that you've seen in boxing. Nonetheless, injuries happen. People get hurt. Look at Michael Bisping. He lost an eye. So they bring in all these USADA testing agents in order to facilitate what I would call as a public relations armor. Okay, so in other words, if let's say a fighter gets seriously hurt in an event, they can just turn around and say, well, these are the measurements that we took in order to have a preventative measure of some sort. We had him take a CAT scan. We had him take a drug test. We had him take a P test. We even made him to do a blood test. Nonetheless, this is an insurance policy. That's what drug testing is. And everybody gets on their high horse. They talk about, oh, well, this guy popped for cheating. He's a cheater. He did this. He did that. One of the things that I mentioned in that video is that, are you going to bring a knife into a gunfight, a pen to a test? Because when you're dealing with the top fighters in the world, a lot of these guys are juicing. And you can choose not to. You can just be like Khabib and go naturally and fight everybody with no drugs in your system. But how is that going to fare out for you? What is this? Breaking news. Michael Chandler offers to adopt Magny's kids. Oh, my goodness. All right. All right. Well, with that in mind, we're going to get some sleep because there is the weigh-ins tomorrow. I will be back to do a post-fight analysis for this particular card. And this is going to be a great card. It's a great main event. It's a great co-main event. It's a great card overall. And GARRY is really stealing the show if you think about it. He said that he's carrying this card on his back. I mean, a lot of people out there are sort of pushing back on that. Like, how dare you? You're not even the main event. Neither was Conor when he took on Max Holloway in the same TD Garden arena right here, right? But, hey, just because you're the main event and you're the co-main event, it doesn't mean that you're the true headline. Sometimes you got to earn your headline. And guess what? GARRY earned his headline for this particular card. Because when we think of this card, yes, the Sean O'Malley and the Aljamain Sterling beef is great. The banter that they had during the press conference was great. But what fighting organization in the world are you going to have about two guys arguing about kids being violated in a physical, hurtful, fighting kind of way? Nowhere. That's why GARRY stole the show. And we're going to see all of that tomorrow. Enjoy the fights.